Hello, Gabbi. Today I'm on my way to go hiking in West London, and to get there I'm taking the world's first underground railway, the Metropolitan Line. When I visited you in Wuhu, your students asked me about the London Underground, and I mentioned that while I loved it, it was very, very old. The line I'm on today opened in 1863 and initially ran just 6 kilometres through London, from Paddington to Farringdon. Those 6 kilometres took about 20 minutes end to end, meaning it averaged about 20 kilometres an hour. That wasn't fast compared to overground trains, which could reach 90 kilometres an hour, but it was fast for central London. At the time, the city was severely overcrowded, and the same journey would have taken closer to 60 minutes on foot or by horse-drawn cab. As a result, the Metropolitan Line was hugely popular, and work quickly began on extending it and building other lines. The early lines were built using a cut-and-cover technique, where workers dug a trench, built the tunnel and laid the track, then covered it over. More advanced tunnelling shields had existed since 1818 and were already being used under the Thames, but they were far more expensive. To keep costs down, the cut-and-cover method was chosen. As a result, these lines run close to the surface. If you visit London, you'll notice you only have to take one short flight of steps down to reach them. Construction of the first line cost about £1 million in the early 1860s. Converting historical costs is always imprecise, but that's roughly £200 million today. When they first built it, they considered the problems of a steam train underground. Electrified rail lines weren't yet a thing, and while battery-operated trains had been demonstrated in 1837, their range was terrible. Instead, they initially proposed either pulling the underground trains with ropes or using a pneumatic system to propel them with air pressure, much like the underground mail system that was under construction in London. But it soon became obvious neither would be cost-effective for passenger trains. The chief engineer then proposed a hybrid train designed to operate on coal above ground but switch to superheated blocks below ground so as not to create any smoke. But he got his calculations wrong, and when the train was unveiled shortly before the line opened, the blocks didn't produce enough power. He was quite embarrassed by this, and apparently never spoke of it again, aside from a passing mention at the opening ceremony. In the end, they had to quickly retrofit a regular steam train with a recondenser to cut down on some of the steam it let out. But it wasn't particularly effective, and so in the initial years, conditions for the passengers and staff were quite unpleasant. Several solutions were trialled to ameliorate the problems, including ventilation holes out onto the streets, low-soot train engines, and even recommendations to train drivers to grow thicker beards to act as face masks. In 1864, another attempt was made at a pneumatic train when a 550-metre test line was built near Crystal Palace. A giant fan created a pressure difference at one end of the tunnel and effectively sucked the passenger train down the line at 40 kilometres an hour. It worked, but still wasn't cost-effective for longer routes, so was abandoned. Ultimately, it wasn't until 1890 that the first underground line was electrified, and the soot and steam problem was resolved. Early carriages were also gaslit, leading to an eerie flickering as they travelled down the line. Again, electric lighting had been demonstrated as far back as 1802, but it wasn't until Edison's bulb in 1879 that it was commercially viable. At that point, they began to install batteries and dynamos in the trains and switched to electric lights. Despite all these early problems, though, the Metropolitan Line was a huge success. And 2 years after opening, it extended west to Notting Hill and east to Moorgate. Then, year by year, it crept further out west, until in 1885 it arrived at Rickmansworth, which is where I'm heading to today, to go hiking. As we travel out of the city, you'll naturally see the buildings become more residential. And the eagle-eyed amongst you will also note that we're no longer underground. This is because most of this land was empty when the line was built. As early as the 1830s, regular travellers between London and Birmingham could buy discounted commutation season tickets. But it wasn't until the Metropolitan Line that the practice of commuting became commonplace and the term commuter entered popular usage. As this happened, the company realised they could buy up empty land west of London, expand out into it, then sell it on for a profit or market housing developments along it. This is why the expansion of the Metropolitan Line westwards was quite slow, as they had to wait for urban development to keep up. Many other underground lines were built in central London in the time it took the Metropolitan Line to expand all the way out to the end. By the way, I call it the company because the first underground lines were built by private companies. They weren't government-owned until 1933. In 1915, the slogan Metroland was developed, selling a vision of life in the leafy suburbs within easy reach of modern London. You might be surprised to hear that, traditionally, the English view living in the countryside as more prestigious and desirable than the city. There are many reasons for this, but one of them, I think, is a cultural memory of the Industrial Revolution. For hundreds of years, cities were dark, polluted, and miserable places. Things have changed a lot since then, but the deep cultural memory persists. Usually today, when we're young, we move to the city for work, and then move out to the suburbs to raise a family, or perhaps even to the countryside to retire. Occasionally you'll hear people talk about retiring and buying a house in the country. Look, even David Beckham did it. I've arrived at my destination now, and am going to hike the Chess Valley Trail. Hope all is well in Wuhu. So long.